Welcome our guest for today, David Zaritsky from the Bond Experience. I'm trying to say it like he says it in
You had the inflection. That was perfect.
it is so iconic, though. It is great. He's here to talk about what it's like being a social media content creator and influencer. I know he will talk maybe a little bit about his opinion of what influencer means versus content creator. But We've got, and this is for the intro to social media class, and we'll be going over a bunch of questions that my students wrote for this interview. So thank you, David, for joining us.
My pleasure. This will be fun.
It's like 20 questions. Start with a couple of mine. I've noticed that as your channel has grown, and I have been there, I think, since the beginning. First of all, your content presentation, your videography, your audio, all of it has been vastly improved. Like it is professional level, I think, at this point, and has been for a couple of years now. But you started off as this being kind of a fan hobby thing. The one thing I did notice is that there's no monetization of your YouTube videos. Can you talk a little bit about that decision?
Yeah, you're right. There's nothing. There's no commercials on YouTube or Instagram. There's no Patreon page. There's no buy me a coffee, buy me a martini. There's nothing wrong with those. So a few years ago, I made a decision basically to straddle the line of content creator and journalism. So in order to do that, in order to be even seen as a journalist, as opposed to, oh, there's a fan creating content, I decided to just take any question out of the people that anoint you as a journalist to put you in front of like the press or the junkets or to some of these excursions I've been on since No Time to Die. I decided to take it out of any question of, well, this is just a guy trying to make money. And I wanted to also take that motivation out of the mind of my audience that, I'm gainfully employed. I've got a nice job and a great support team, and I'm not looking to make money. That's not my motivation and goal in doing this. It's really to entertain myself, as strange as that is of a priority. And then if I wind up entertaining others, that's probably my second goal. So I took out any question of financial gain in that.
Well, we talk about how that to be successful in this, you really have to have a passion for it because it takes time to build an audience. You're not getting it. If LeBron James fires up a social media account, he's going to immediately get millions of people. But the rest of us, it takes work and dedication, and you've really put that in over the past. When did you start? What year?
I started around 2011. But 2012 is when the channel actually became something on YouTube to be regarded. Quick story how it happened. I did a review of a Billy Reid pea coat from Skyfall, and it wound up selling 800 coats in just a few months. And at $900 a piece, Billy Reid was pretty happy. So I decided to take this whole review aspect with James Bond brands and blow it out.
And really the niche element is kind of important for that, right? That there are people all over the road talking about this Bond or that about Bond or this about Bond. You're really in a narrow, though you stray occasionally here and there, of course, but you always go back to that theme of Bond lifestyle.
Yeah, I do. I think a part of that is, when I think about what's connected with my channels, it's being relatable. And I think the thing that people can relate to is you've got to put on your pants and shirt every day. Sometimes if you're lucky, you put on a watch. And if you could do that while emulating or engaging a character that you connect with or entertained by, it's a plus, it's a bonus. So the whole Bond lifestyle, I think that's why it gravitates to every age group.
We don't really need to get into why James Bond. I mean, there's plenty, people can look at your videos, there's plenty of those. Getting back to the idea of content creation and posting, do you use any kind of content management system to do that, or is it all by hand when you're ready to post?
This is going to make your students like absolutely aghast. I used to have HubSpot. I used to have things that would post automatically. I reverted back to hand cranking everything. Like when I post, at 7:35 in the evening, that's me posting at 7:35. The reason is I was losing the fun in that really kind of disposable moment that you have that just disappears. You get that high of sharing something. So having it automated, I was losing that and I pulled it all back. So the long answer is no, I don't use automation to do anything really.
Now, do you track your metrics and analytics?
That I do. I do because, and it's not even that I'm trying to find, I know many people are like, well, when's the best time? Who's the best audience? I'm just genuinely curious about content and what connects with people. The other thing I'm almost morbidly curious about is engagement length. So I have videos where they'll watch 75 to 78% of a long video. Short video, they'll watch for 15%. I always try to, like a detective, I try to find the why in that.
Yeah, it's funny because that is really the key is the, and my students are sick of me using the word, but engagement and keeping people. But that's more for if you're trying to monetize. But I think you seemingly are just doing it to see as a marketing professional, probably as to seeing what's working and what's not working, and if you can make any improvements to that, you will.
Yeah, and I think too, for those who are watching this, if you move away from monetization, you turn yourself into an entertainer. So as an entertainer, I do want to know who in the audience, just like a play, creating a play, who in the audience is really enthralled with this versus bored. It's not something they want to see again. Oh, I've seen that and done that. So I'm gauging really the audience reaction more than typical analytics.
And was there anything specific you've learned?
Yes, I've learned that anytime I have a car in the video or my wife, people watch longer.
Hmm.
I don't know how to measure that yet, but it'll happen.
Well, it's the old, if you knew how to make a viral video, you could quit your day job, right? Because you could just tell people how to do it. And it's sometimes surprisingly what you learn if you study what you're doing, but can't replicate it all the time.
Yeah, and I've also found out, this might be interesting for your students, remarkably, thumbnails on my videos are as important sometimes as the content themselves because it draws that compelling curiosity to invite somebody into your home or into your content. So I've taken painstaking movements to really improve my YouTube thumbnails to make them a little bit more appropriate to what people are seeing.
Now, what about outside of YouTube? I see you on Instagram.
Yeah.
What other social media do you utilize? And is it as important, or is it just the driver to your YouTube videos?
That's a great question. And I think it probably leans a little heavier to everything acts as a driver. I know X, Twitter, Facebook, I really don't like it all. I use those as almost like mini commercials. When I have a new video, I post on there, hey, I've got a new video. This is what it's about. Talk to you later. I really don't use those platforms to engage or socialize. YouTube is, think of it as Madison Square Garden for me. And then I have these kind of ancillary places like Instagram. That being said, Instagram on my channel has exploded. I think I started out the year at like 65,000 and now it's over 105,000. And I think a part of that is that I do write individual and separate stories just for Instagram. But along the way, they do push you to the YouTube channel.
So that increase and consistency, I mean, that's been appealing, right, to some of these bond brands that have reached out to you and provided you with access that most people wouldn't have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the beginning, a lot of these bond brands probably see it in a very transactional way. So right now, as the number one, however you want to call it, YouTube or Instagram are focused on James Bond, they'll go and they'll say, well, this guy has a captive audience. But what happens over time is I've befriended these brands. So they don't see it as just a transactional moment. They see me as sort of a ribbon that runs in launches or just different techniques they have with their marketing, because a lot of them are very restricted. So you call on somebody like a content creator who can maybe do a little bit more than the brand can do.
All right, I'm going to pull out my students' questions.
Do.
So we have, what was the first step you took in creating your Bond brand? Also, what has been the proudest moment in your online social media career?
So I think the first step in creating an actual brand was to organize myself. You know, it a lot of people I think will run to technology, or maybe they say that they have to create their very first video or a logo design. My first brand movement was sitting down and understanding the why. Why the heck am I going to do this? I'm a busy person, just like you're all busy people. So I had to find the passion, you know, what drove me to it every single day. And I think the proudest moment that I've ever had is always engaging face to face as opposed to online like this, engaging face to face with the different audience members, with the people that follow the Bond franchise. And that could be through fan events or even touch bases like this.
All right. Does your passion for content creation and exploration of Bond ever feel like a job now that you've become so popular and feel, though, as you owe it to your following?
There was a time when it did feel like a job. And it was because I was treating it like a job, you know, overscheduling, taking the fun out of it, consequences, you know, the consequences of not doing something and not capturing a particular video. I had to sit down. There's a lot of therapeutic moments in the world of Bond when you're a fan, as you can imagine. So I had to sit down with myself and I said, go back to why you did this to begin with. And by the way, any time in life, whether it's job, life, personality, Bond content creation, when I get lost, my compass is the why, you know, the original passion. And because of that, I was able to find my way back, and it doesn't ever feel like a job anymore. In fact, I get up in the morning and I want to create. And there was a real quick story to the student who asked this. There was a gentleman one time at an event who came over to me, nice guy, by the way. He didn't mean anything by this. And he said, David, do you ever stop filming? Do you ever stop? And I said, but this is my fun. Like, I have a job. It's not always fun. This is my fun. So I'm going to keep having fun.
That's a great story. Yeah. And you have to find the why in anything you do.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Next question. Do you have a process in how you portray yourself and the things you review or post about to keep people engaged? There's that word again. I told you, I've drilled it into their heads, engage.
I like that. Engagement is huge. And I'll tell you, this may fly in the face of everything that you've learned, people, but I don't have a particular process other than I do, before I get in front of the camera, and with most of my videos, probably 95% of my videos, I'm not scripted, but I go over the bullet points in my head. I never write anything down. So I go over the 4 or 5 bullet points. And what I do is I psych myself up that I'm having a conversation, not with my iPhone, but with Brian, with Jeremy, with Steve, with Donna. I imagine a person talking to me. And then I just act like myself. Like, what you see on the camera is what you would get. And people who meet me for the first time go, you really like this in real life. Like, you're not putting it on for the camera. And I'm like, no. So that's my only process, is to just make sure that I'm just being my authentic self.
Well, that's huge. And that's no matter any type of trying to create a connection with an audience, that's important, is not being a phony, because people tend to smell that after a while, especially with the amount of content you have created. I mean, it's a large amount, which leads me to the question. Let me look down because that ties in. I need the cheaters here because we're both of a similar age. Somebody said about, and I'm always entertained by this, is when you make mistakes, you leave them in, whether it's the podcast or the video. And someone asked if that if you have any concerns about doing that, or brands not seeing you as completely professional because you're not perfectly well spoken, but you're leaving in the mistakes and not going to reshoot what you've recorded.
Not only do I leave in the mistakes, when I do catch myself with the mistakes, I call it out on film. There's a lot of self-deprecating moments. So I will say, and I'll go back to this big word that I keep using, relatability. It is so vital that, yes, I'm talking about beautiful watches and driving nice cars and flying to different locations. People need to know I'm not a robot. and that this isn't overly glossed over and it's not this high production. It's some James Bond fan schnook that just happens to have created an engaging moment for people to enjoy. So I leave it all in because I want people to know that this is not a perfect world that I'm living in. It's not a perfect channel. And I will tell you real quick, 30-second story. A few years ago, I hired an editor and I got a couple people together and we did about 3 or 4 glossy videos. And the brands hated it because they can go to Madison Avenue and pay an agency $250,000 to do a video. Chances are my videos are going to have more likes and views and engagement than theirs, and they do. They don't want the glossy stuff. They can do that themselves.
Well, and that's the social part of social media, is the relatability and how it's your friend. Like you make that connection and you're talking about things that you enjoy with your friend, and
Yeah.
that's great. Speaking of that, is one of the questions. It is clear that that your blog started as a passion project, but do you face burnout now that it has become bigger than you intended, and how do you deal with that feeling?
It's the question I get most asked when people meet me in real life. They go, how are you coming up with 2 YouTube videos a week, 3 posts a day, blah, 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 blah. Like, and I'm here to tell them that I have a ledger filled with ideas that I will never finish. I get up in the morning, like a Saturday morning typically for me is I'll get up and I probably want to film about 3 to 4 videos in a row. And it's just nonstop. It's like boom, 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 boom. A couple hours later, I'm done. And then I have to edit them. But it's almost like this itch that I need to scratch from a creative standpoint. And it's purely creative. It's not, to go back to the job thing, it's not like, oh crap, I need to get out a video this week. I will tell you, I've got about 15 videos in the queue at any one time that I can just pull the trigger and launch. But I need to get this out, especially without a movie. I mean, we don't have a lot of stuff that we can kind of connect to, but yeah, what's the opposite of burnout? I don't know, a floodgate of ideas and creativity. And this is what my therapy is. Like I have a very, like you, everybody who's listening, have a very stressful moments in their life. And this is my detoxification.
And you still have to balance that with, you have a family, you have a full-time job, a very busy job.
Yeah.
So that is kind of,
Well, I get up at 3 and sometimes 4 in the morning. My alarm's set for 5, but I haven't heard my alarm in many years. And I go to sleep late. So not to quote a Bond villain, but I don't sleep. I have to live my dreams. So I think that is an added advantage because a lot of the stuff I do for Bond is before anybody even wakes up.
So the next question, what advice would you give to a person whose content has slowed down a bit, someone who has lost the motivation to content create after already gaining a significant lucrative following?
Oh, is this an actual like person that like they have this and they want to know?
I'm not sure. I asked for questions and this is what came in. I'm not exactly
I like that.
sure, but yes, it is a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I'm just going to say what works for me is if you're feeling that way and you're feeling that burnout that's occurred, you've got to go back to basics. And what I have seen is this, and it's not just being lucrative, but when people gain popularity or relevance, as I'd like to call, a couple things happen where they feel like they've got to stay above water that whole time. And I always tell people, dance like nobody sees that you're dancing. Just and it's the same thing with content creators. Create content like nobody's even watching you, because in the beginning nobody's watching you, and there's something very powerful and relaxing. Your embarrassment gene is at an all-time low. Your shields are not up. It's a wonderful feeling, and then suddenly you gain popularity and people want certain things from you, and then you feel obligation and consequences to creating that type of content. And it's this very onerous, back-breaking responsibility. Shuck that off. Create for yourself. Go back to your passion. Go back to the basics. And I think you'll find your why again.
Well stated. Well stated. Someone wants to know, if you didn't get some of your lifestyle inspiration from James Bond, would there be another famous character you'd be inspired by?
No, next question. No, how dare they? You know something? I've been through a journey. I mean, there was a long time when I was really, and I mean really into Indiana Jones.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Well, and it started with Mantis, right? Which is somebody probably few people remember.
well, yeah. I mean, I went through so many different phases and then all the phases together and intertwined. But even with Indiana Jones, like studying the outfits and wearing the leather jacket around and wearing a fedora, as you know, from time to time,
Mhm.
and looking at old world 1930s, 1940s clothing. And so Steve McQueen has been a big inspiration in my life. I'm wearing like a Steve McQueen, literally his label right now. So the nice thing is, generationally speaking, and even through the movies, there's so many people that we can get sort of our patterns off of. And, people may go out there, maybe even your students, and say, well, you can't be original. Let me share something with you. Nobody's original. We all accumulate like a snowball pieces of things that we observe in life, and it makes up who we are. It's like an algorithm of different pieces that make up a David Zaritsky or a Brian. So I've picked up a lot of pieces. Steve McQueen, just the list goes on. But yes, there would be others besides James Bond. Sorry, James Bond.
Well, I don't know if you heard, I did an interview, Joe Darlington of Being James Bond interviewed me one time. And I said, at the end of the day, I think it's being David Zaritsky, or the David Zaritsky experience is what most of us want now, because,
Oh, it's not.
it's avoiding the negative aspects of being a spy and having to murder people. And
Well, that's it.
yeah,
Yeah. Just gravitate to the good stuff. That's all.
exactly. So what's next for the Bond experience?
So I think as I look to 2024, and there's a lot of planning for 2024, it's a lot of events, different location events. It's a lot of getting together with the fans. I've got a lot of different ideas. I'm working, I would say I'm working more with the brands than ever. And what I love about what I'm doing with the brands that's different than years ago is that the brands and my channel become much more organized. So instead of like something coming out and I go, knock, 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 hey, brand, do you want me to review this? We are talking 6 to 10 months down the line. We're talking about how do we integrate together more? How do we create proactive things? And it's an important thing to discuss because we're not going to have a movie for several years. So people like you, people like me, the other fans in the community are going to have to create the content that keeps us bolstered.
And the last question someone wanted to know, of course, is
Yep.
who is your pick for the next James Bond?
Ooh. Now, let me ask a question about the question, and maybe you can help me with this. Is this who do I think is going to be the next James Bond, or who would I love to be the next James Bond?
I would go with who would you love to see as the next James Bond? Because I think you and I share this answer.
It's so commercial, but maybe that's the reason. And a big part of this is so selfish because this guy would be the greatest ambassador since Roger Moore. He's a fan himself. He's a geek. He's a good-looking geek, but it's Henry Cavill.
Yep.
I just think that he has it all. I think he's got the chops to do it. I think he's got plenty of life. I hate to be like this, that guy in the room, but women want to be with him and men want to be him. And that's like almost like a little criteria of James Bond. But I can just imagine him embracing the fans like the franchise has never embraced before.
I think would be the ideal choice. Though what holds me back a little bit is the fact that is it fair that he is Napoleon Solo, Superman, Sherlock Holmes, and James Bond? Like, wow, what a list of
But
iconic characters.
Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, Blade Runner,
Oh
Han
yeah,
Solo. He's got a lot to his name, and the list goes on.
that is true. That
Yeah.
is true. Well, I really appreciate your time. And like I said, I hope our paths will cross sooner than later because a lot, during the pandemic, your constant videos and live streams kept us all kept our hopes up and kept us entertained and informed. And we really appreciate that. And hopefully my students also appreciate your candidness and the time you've spent with us today.
Well, thanks. I'd love to get their reaction to this. It'll be a lot of fun to hear about it.
I'll let you know.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, David. We'll see you on social media.
Take care.
You too.
That was great.